So the Navigator Stout is a beer that we've brewed trying to really harness a lot of the complex nuances that are present in Irish dry stouts. Many of our other beers have a very extensive grain bill with 6 or 7 or 8 different kinds of malts used in small amounts just to give nuances in the beer. This is actually probably the most simple of all of our recipes. And I think the key to a good Irish stout is really trying to nail the nuances. And the way that I think that you do that is really just try and craft a recipe so that the percentages of the different malts that you're using are really able to come together in a way that's smooth and that's pleasing for the customer. Personally, I don't like stouts very much that are too heavy on the coffee note, and so I think that it's important when you're doing this to source good grains, which is what we've done. Really, the base malt, and there's different kinds of malt. There's usually a base malt and then the specialty malts that you're using. The base malt is a pale ale malt or a Pilsner malt, depending on the beer, that is used in almost every single beer. But I think if you're going to do this at home, it's really good to use an English yeast, or sorry, an English malt. I think that they've made these malts for centuries for these types of beers, and so I think a good English base malt is important. And then roasted barley is one of the key ingredients to an Irish dry stout. It gives a bit of a dark reddish hue to the beer, a little bit of that roastiness. But I think if you go too much on it, it starts to create flavors that I would say are unwanted in an Irish stout. And really, and then to top it off, to use hops that are English-based hops. I mean, I think that there are many American styles that you could substitute, but if you're going to do this at home, I would say really work on using ingredients from the source so you can produce a traditional beer. Well, I think for this beer, I think that the base malt that's good to use is really a Maris Otter malt from England or a floor malted barley. Both of these are very traditional malts from England. They bring out a little bit more maltiness and even a slight biscuit flavor, which I think is very nice in a stout. And so really, I think if you can source a Maris Otter type malt from many of the different providers out there, that's key. I think also, you know, what I said about the roasted barley, really about 5 to 7% of the grain bill using roasted barley will give a really nice reddish hue to the beer and some of that kind of just complex nuances that you want in an Irish stout. Flaked barley is also really important. I mean, flaked barley at smaller amounts, 5% or so, what that will do is give body and head retention to the beer. Now, a lot of Irish stouts, when they mash the grains in with the water, they'll usually do it at higher temperatures, and what that does is it leaves a fuller-bodied beer. It leaves more sugar in the liquid, so it's a fuller beer. What we've done with our stout is actually mash a little bit lower in order to make it as drinkable as possible. And we've had many people say that they really enjoyed it because it didn't leave you with the heaviness that maybe a bigger stout might. Well, I think based on all of my wife's experiences in conflict zones around the world, we've really tried to set up a theme with our beers where we name them in honor of some of the great peace builders or healers, I would say, of the world, the great reconcilers. And so this stout is actually named after St. Brendan the Navigator, who's one of the famous Irish apostles. And the reason why we actually named this is really to honor, I would say, the love story of my wife and myself. It'd be the only one, I guess, that doesn't carry the name of Jeanette Rankin or Mahatma Gandhi. Or I think, but the story with St. Brendan is in the 500s. He sailed across the Atlantic, and 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus. And so on his way, he found a mythical island, which he said was paradise on earth. And he named this in ancient Gaelic, High Brazil, meaning the greatest of the great. And so for my wife, who's Brazilian, we wanted to honor an Irish stout named after one of the great Irish apostles who found an island, named it in an ancient Gaelic tongue where the name Brazil actually comes from now.